My name is Mohammed Abdel-Aal. I am part of KAUST. I lead an organization known as the Digital Experience and Innovation Group under a brand that we call KAUST Smart. I've done this before to a lot of startup companies. I'm used to doing it on stage, doing it remotely, and doing it over a video conference is a challenge. But it is what we can do, and we'll make the most out of it. So please try to interact, ask questions. I can't see you. You can see me, but I can't see your reaction. So it's a very kind of a challenging situation to do these things online. But again, we'll make the most out of it. My title for the presentation today is, it's your digital playground for innovation. KAUST Smart is your digital playground for innovation. I'll explain what KAUST Smart is. I'll encourage you to think about how you want to collaborate with us in the future. But also, we're going to take the time to walk you through the way we do things and the way we emphasize the human, let's say human-centric aspect of ideas and innovations. It's kind of a coaching session for your pitches and for your own even entrepreneurial product development, product ideas, is how to cater for your customer more so than the technology. And I'll explain to you what I mean as I walk you through some of the slides. So let's just get started. So let me just go to my presentation. Here we go. Before I start, I know this is probably a younger crowd, and I'm not that old, but there's a younger group in audience here, and I want to encourage you to think with me and go back a little bit to a past movie, Back to the Future. You may not have seen this movie. I highly encourage you to do so. If you're thinking about innovations, ideas in the future, go back to this movie, watch it. It's on Netflix, by the way, so I know it's there. There's two parts, Back to the Future 1, Back to the Future 2. Both movies came around the mid-'80s to late '80s. There's a third part, which you can probably skip the third part. You're not going to lose much. So part 1, part 2 is what you want to watch. This movie came in the mid-'80s to late '80s and forecasted what a future should look like. They got almost everything right. I say almost everything right. We don't have flying cars yet, but we're seeing things about flying cars coming soon. So you'll be surprised. But this movie basically goes to 2015, which has passed us already. So it's interesting to watch the movie knowing that 2015 is already 6 years behind us. But when they did that in the '80s, that was the future vision. And they forecasted things, so they went to 2015, as you can see it here. And they forecasted flying cars, they forecasted or predicted augmented reality goggles. They actually also had video conferencing, what we're doing today, on a screen on a TV, which is, again, mind-boggling back in the '80s to think about these things that could happen today. And they projected even self-serving diners and cafes. And there's even drones and more things. I can't talk about it all in one. But go back and look at this movie and see and get inspired by some interesting ideas. So what we're doing here at KAUST, KAUST Smart is a brand name. It's basically taking advantage of the KAUST campus we live in. If you have not been to KAUST, we welcome you to come visit. But KAUST is a city as well as a university and research facilities. So we have a complete city in our backyard, a city that have people that live there, work there. We have recreational facilities, we have schools. The roads we control and own. The land is ours. The space, the air above us is also ours. And we run facilities. We pretty much are in control of one big city. Big in the sense of not necessarily big city, but it's big enough that it's a model of any other cities that we want to forecast or model against. And we want to take advantage of that city. So KAUST Smart is about taking advantage of the uniqueness that we have, the people, and the life and the pattern of society that we have. So we decided to take advantage of that and launch this experimentation laboratory called KAUST Smart. What does that mean? So we compare ourselves to others. I mean, these are brand names of things you might have heard of or you didn't, but these are institutions, companies, initiatives that are run around the world. IDEO is one of the famous ones that pioneered design thinking. Skunk Works is Lockheed Martin's way of innovation. Sidewalk Lab is Google's partnership to do smart city innovations, and they try to do it in multiple cities, and it didn't work out really well for them, and I'll tell you why. IBM, SAP, a lot of other places are doing this kind of the same thing we are trying to do, but there's one difference that we have, one advantage we have. We have the city with us. They don't have cities. they try to work with public cities, and they go through the process of getting permissions and approvals and city council, then city law, then state law. There's a very complex world outside when you talk about public cities. Now at KAUST, we have this advantage because we control the city. So what do we do? What does KAUST Smart do? KAUST Smart does a lot of things, but I'll try to emphasize a few of them. We basically started to focus on what we call the human experience. So we design and create new experiences, concepts, and ideas. We put them out in KAUST. We gather feedback. We get people involved. And again, we evaluate, part of that, we evaluate technology as well. But we don't begin with technology first. We begin with the experience first. We engage our community and our partners, our industry partners, companies that Microsoft, Cisco, Intel, and others, many, many more. We promote it, right? And we actually advertise, and we'd like to communicate what we do and what we do with you and with others. And we also kind of try to collect this data that comes along with it, and again, start to build some intellectual property around the data. Challenging one, we're not quite there with the last one, right? This is a little bit of a complex world, and we are young. We are only about a year and a half, 2 years old. So we didn't really do a lot of work in the data yet, but this is our plan to do that. Now, again, how do we do this work? We do it through a methodology. This is where the second half of the presentation today is going to focus on. So my colleague here, Sharif Atiyah, will also jump in and actually explain the methodology in depth. The methodology is about getting ideas that inspire us, applying design thinking methodology approaches, doing some kind of a rapid development, a hackathon, a creation, get a prototype out, and get feedback on it, and constantly go through this process, right? We believe that, doing things once big is maybe not our approach, right? It might be suitable for things that are, need that, sophisticated, but we like to do things in small increments, small pieces, and keep constantly innovating around it until it becomes something of value to people and to the institutions we work with. We'll expand on that in a second here. This is a busy chart, but again, it's just about experiences. We focus on experiences. The titles here are illustrating what we're tackling. We're tackling dining, mobility, visitor, employee experience, student, events, living, and many, many more. I don't want to get caught up on this. This is not a comprehensive slide. It's a dynamic slide. It's not meant to be everything we do, but it's just to highlight that we tackle experiences more than we tackle technologies. And technologies come as part of that afterwards. So my message today to you is, and again, I can't see you all. I probably can get a list of all the companies that are presented here with startup companies, but I want you to think about how you want to pilot your ideas at KAUST. If you have an idea and you want to take advantage of that, come join us, right? So bring your ideas or your prototypes, bring it to KAUST. We're going to be happy to work with you to access the city resources and access, to pioneering faculty and research if you're not doing that already. We'll give you support on the methodologies that I just explained, and you'll see more of it in the second half. And again, marketing, visibility, try your product, learn, and again, continue your journey of entrepreneurship. After that, you'll end up with an enhanced value proposition of your product or your ideas. So the whole point is we're giving you, again, a digital playground to try things out. I'll give you a specific example. And this is where we are putting a lot of emphasis on autonomous mobility. KAUST has become known as an autonomous mobility lab and a hub in the kingdom and the region because we began testing autonomous driving. We didn't go buy autonomous driving, right? It's a little bit bleeding edge. So we began testing and experimenting with that and getting the humans involved as well as the users. So we began piloting, autonomous driving. We have 2 vehicles today, and we'll probably have more in the near future. And those are running at campus, and we're learning, right? There's a lot of logistical challenges to bring this equipment into the kingdom, right? How do you bring it in? How do you support it with infrastructure? How do you map the routes that you want to run on? How to engage our own community, health and safety? At the end of the day, it's a self-driving vehicle, right? It's going to drive by itself. Does it work? Does it not work? Is it risky? Could it cause, God forbid, an accident? How do we manage all that risk and all this assessment? So we're testing these things as we speak, and we're learning, right? And we're making mistakes, which we love. And the vendors or the suppliers are also enhancing their technology because it's not perfect and it will never be perfect, but it's constant improvement. And we're running those at campus, and we're getting people engaged. We're getting external entities involved. The government is also involved to test it because there's a lot of ideas around how autonomous driving could shape the future of cities. And again, it will probably swing between high ambition to more realistic and then back in the middle. You will see that this spectrum is going to of self-driving will swing on extremes until it settles in some kind of a sweet spot where things work, but you don't require a major change to every city in the world. And we're enhancing that. So there's more plans about upgrading vehicles, making it part of a smart traffic lights as well. And again, how do we handle bus stops and how do we handle people interaction with these buses on your phone, in a location, or again, in a bus stop. So as we do that, there's much more to talk about, right? But I don't want to bore you with a lot of things. I want this session to be a little more practical about how do we get you guys involved? How can we make you part of this? This is my contact information. We don't stop here. We're going to continue. Sharif is going to come in and talk a little bit about the methodology that I just explained earlier. But please note down my information if you like. But let me pause here, take some questions, see if there's any interaction, and then we can jump into the second half of the session today. So let us pause and see. Do you have any questions at all? So far, no questions yet. Am I correct? Yeah, I want to encourage you guys to get interactive. It's hard to do this on Zoom already. I can't see your eyes. I can't see your faces. I don't know how you guys feel like. But again, any questions? Not yet. All right, the crowd is quiet. Sharif, we gotta get these guys going. All right. Well, we have no questions yet. Okay, no problem. So we'll get you guys hopefully interacting in a second. To be practical, let's talk about how we do things and what is our pitch to you. So I'll pause. Let me actually add one more thing before I switch to Sharif here. I always have a chance to be a judge sometimes in competitions, and I get to see your pitches, and I get to see pitches in person, in presentations, but also see it in writing, in proposals. And what we're trying to work with you here today and try to convince you is how to make your approach, again, a little bit more human-centric. A lot of the proposals I see as a judge sometimes, I'm not a judge in Taqaddam this year, but a lot of the proposals that I've seen in the past come along and they have titles that are telling me this startup idea is about technology and they haven't figured out exactly where they want to use it for. So the title of the presentation begins by saying something like, enhance IoT in a 5G environment to tackle, environmental sensing. And I start to look into the proposals and the presentations. I start to go through it. And again, you're giving me most of the time slides or pages to read that are talking about how IoT and 5G is awesome. And I get that. But I'm in my mind, I'm asking myself, what are you telling me? What do you want to do? What is it that you are trying to create value? And I keep turning the page and after, and I don't see it. And sometimes it's towards the end, where, and now we're going to make people's life better by doing so and so and so. So you missed me in the very first, let's say 10 minutes where you have my attention and you're talking about how technology is so good. And honestly speaking, it gets a little bit boring for judges. We kind of skip. We're like, you know what, that's not gonna, no, forget it. Not, give it a low score. And I may not get to your end of your pitch. My advice to you, and you'll see it here in a second with Sharif, is begin telling us, what do you want to do, right? What is your value? What do you want to add, right? And give that in the first sentence, in the first header. Don't begin by talking about IoT, sensors, 5G, Wi-Fi, the next connected car. Tell us what value you want to add, right? And as you say that, keep in mind the user and keep in mind the human centricity, and give that the immediate, 10 seconds or 30 seconds that is the most valuable time for a judge to hear you. And don't talk about how the technology is awesome. Trust me, we know that it's probably good. And we know that you can probably pioneer it, but tell us how the user, the people, the value that you'll bring in the first 30 seconds. Otherwise, you'll lose the judges. I can't tell you how many recently. I was evaluating exactly 33 proposals over a weekend. And I was about to kind of shoot myself at the end because, out of the 33 proposals, maybe 5 proposals caught my attention. The other ones were simply expanding on how great the technology is and how great the R&D is, but nobody's able to pitch what value do you want to bring in. And again, you'll lose the judges that way. So with that in mind, let me stop here. And we're going to switch now to Sharif, who's going to talk a little bit more about the methodology that KAUST Smart applies and how we would encourage you to not only pick it up and build on it, but also come join the lab here at KAUST and be part of it. If you're around the kingdom, around the area, then great. If you're not, it's still doable. There are a lot of ways to do it. So feel free to, again, connect with us and talk about it. So Sharif, I'll switch over to you. I'll stop sharing and you'll put up your slides.
Thank you, Mohammed. Hello, everyone. My name is Sharif Ataya. I'm a member of the KAUST Smart team. I am something called an experience designer, which you will actually design an experience based on what Mohammed explained now. So let me just share my screen to explain exactly what does that mean. Right. So as what Mohammed mentioned now, our main focus is the user. So we just need to focus on the user needs and something else called pain points. First of all, our tool of measuring that is something called design thinking. Design thinking is a human-centered framework for innovation, which actually, as you can see from the 5 circles down there, first step is to empathize and then define the pain points and the problem that you need to solve by creating your own product. Then from there you ideate, which is brainstorming. Then you come up with a prototype, you test it. If it's okay and it comes up with the solution that we are looking for, then we use something called rollout, and then you come up with a product, bring it to the market. What is a user centricity? User centricity is that you need to think about your user. You're not thinking about the customer, you're thinking about the user. There's a big difference between a customer and a user. A user is the person who is actually going to give you the feedback about your product, whatever it is, if it's an app, if it's a food related, if it's a technology related, someone who's actually going to use it. So you need to understand who is your audience. You need to identify that. And then you need to visualize your personas. You need to think about their needs and the product that's going to fulfill is exactly what I just said. So then think about their pain points and that your product will address. So we need to understand some terminology from here. What is a persona? A user persona, it's actually, it's a thing that we have to try and to understand the different types of people and users involved in the scenario. Basically, you are doing a market segment. You need to know who is your target audience exactly. So how do we do that? User personas usually are fictional characters created to represent the different people that are part of this experience. As you can see from the picture here, there's a persona profile. You just put a picture. If it's actually a real person, and of course you need to ask their permission. You put their picture, or you can create a fictional picture for them. You put the name, you put the profession, the age, is as if you are creating a totally fictional character. It's like Mohammed's example from the movie Back to the Future. Those characters were created out of nowhere. The writers of the movie just created them from their own mind. It's exactly the same thing. You just bring them to life. And then we need to understand what is a pain point. A pain point is that this is the empathetic approach that we explained, me and Mohammed, which is the first circle. Is you need to put yourself in that user's shoes. What's bugging them? What makes them happy? You need to identify the issues. You need to identify the problems that they are facing in order for you to come up with the perfect solution for them. So, like Mohammed said, gave the last examples that he had when he was a judge. He saw a lot of pitches that were talking all about technology. This is not what we're doing. This is what Muhammad meant. So what we need to do is that we need to check those three statements. If you're a product focused statement, first thing you're gonna talk about is the product and the technology. Like, we offer 5 different types of routers. Good. This is very good. But why are you offering 5 different types of routers? Who are you actually targeting here? So, for example, you could say kids and elderly can easily connect their iPads with one click. So first of all, you have identified who the target audience. Now, who is your user? Who do you want to buy those types of routers? And then you made it easy that you show them the solution, which they can connect their iPads with just one click. Yeah. So, and there's another thing. When you talk about your technology, it's a state-of-the-art technology. But yeah, thank you so much. It's very nice. But why? Why are you making a state-of-the-art technology? It's the same thing. You need to give it the base. Who are you targeting for, and who and the user? How would they benefit from it? So, how to pitch with a user-centric focused? As we all mentioned, this is how to address the target audience, and you need to clarify how your product is going to help them. And the best thing is that you need to tell your story from a user experience perspective, like what we meant, that put yourself in the user's shoes. I'll give you an example here. So let's assume that I have a company that sells smart locks. And I had a chat with someone in KAUST, and they want us to sell our smart locks. They'll have a deal with KAUST. So based on it, when we sat with them, we have identified who are the target audience. Who do you want us to sell those smart locks to? So they told us it's going to be sold to the student housing. So now we have who our target audience and how can our smart locks help them solve their issues. So we had something called research part. The research part is that you sit with the students, you identify their pain points, and then a technique to identify those pain points and their issues is doing interviews. Those kind of interviews is not like an interview going to apply for a job. It's not a yes and no question that you're expecting from the student. It's the way that when you ask a question, you expect a story to be told in return. So after doing research, as you can see here, we come up with something called a user journey, which is what is their journey? What makes them happy? What makes them sad? Where is the line between both? So when we actually this is actually a real case that we tackled here in KAUST. So when we met with a couple of students, of course not couple, we met like almost over 30 students to come up with the best ideas and best solutions for them. The majority agreed on when the onboarding process, which when they come from their countries to join KAUST for the first time, they need to go to a place called the housing office, and then they have to receive the keys, and then after that they will be transferred to their unit where they going to spend their accommodation. And then that's one of the issues. The other thing is that on those accommodations, sometimes if you're a single person and a student, you get a shared accommodation. So in this criteria, you only have one key. Sometimes when your roommate is not there, you might get locked out. This is also one of the things that they've been facing. For example, you're a student and you are in a lab, and then you get a call from the maintenance team that they need to come in and check something at the unit, and you're already in the lab and you can't leave now. So how are we going to solve this problem? And the last thing is that one of the last point, the last but not least, of course, the least but not last, providing key to visitors and caretakers. For example, you're going to you're going for a vacation, but you need a caretaker to just keep on checking on the house so something doesn't go bad. So let's take this examples. So here, before the arrival at KAUST, Ahmed received the information about his housing unit, including his smart lock details and the PIN code. So when he actually heads directly to his unit, there's no more the phase or the part of the journey that he goes to the housing center, receives a key, and then move back to the unit. He just, once he arrives to KAUST, he heads directly to his unit, and with the PIN code that he was given, he can easily enter his unit. On the other hand, he can easily also provide access to the unit to any visitor who's coming to visit him, such as family or even caretakers when he's not there. The second part of the journey, which we just explained, is that now Ahmed is at the lab and he receives a call from the maintenance team that they need to get into his unit to fix a problem. The problem is now that he's already in the lab and he cannot leave. He's doing an experiment. So what happens is that because we have a smart lock and we give part of the features that you can have an app, so you simply open the app from your phone and you just unlock the door. So the maintenance team will go inside, fix the issue, and leave. And the last point here that Ahmed was talking about, well, mostly the students, is that you get locked out of the unit. So if you're going to a townhouse and you're sitting in the backyard enjoying the good weather that we're having, for example, today, but the problem is that you got locked out of the house. Now you're stuck in the backyard and there's no one inside the house. So what do? Still, you also have the app. You can unlock the door easily and get back into the house. So a recap to what we have done. So basically what I've just explained briefly now is that how to focus and build your product based on a user-centric point of view, which is you need to identify the problems that this user or your user in this case are going to face and build your product based on how to solve their issues. Well, and that was the last of my slides. So I'll just come back and wait for questions.
All right, well, let's check and see if there's any questions from the audience here. Anybody has any questions? Because if not, I will ask questions.
Yeah.
So far, no questions being raised yet. Either you guys are all doing this and have perfected it already and we are redundant, or you are you're shy. All right, we have one question here actually. How do you get your target audience and how to do the interviews? Okay, it's a good question. Sharif, why don't you answer that one first, and I have some comments on that. How do you get your target, or how do you know your target audience, and how do you do interviews with them?
So how do I know the target audience is that when you get that we call a challenge or the idea that they want to build. So for example, when someone approaches you or you're building your own product, you know what kind of product you want to build. So you start thinking, who are going to use this, like what I've explained, is that who are going to use this product as a user. And then from that point, from this point you identify who is going to be your target. How do you conduct an interview? Is like what I just explained in my presentation, is that when you sit with the user or the target audience you have identified, you ask questions that you don't expect a yes and no question. Like for example, we're talking about breakfast. We had a session a few days ago about how to enhance the breakfast at the diner here. So you don't go ask the user or the person who is having the problem, how do you like your eggs, for example? That's not a question, because it's going to be a straight answer. I like my eggs scrambled. I like my eggs boiled. No, tell me. So this is the kind of question you need to ask. Like, tell me your experience regarding the breakfast from the moment you wake up. So what happens here is that the user will tell you a story. So I wake up at 8 a.m., I go take my shower, I change my clothes, I head to the diner, I stand in line, and then he starts giving you all the details of his life until he gets the breakfast or she gets the breakfast. From that, you will realize, so there's a pain point in like what? There is a long queue at the diner. How to have this part? There is the X station is very far from the cashier, for example, in order to pay. So I have to stand in a longer queue at the queue at the end. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the type of questions you need to ask is not a yes and no or a straightforward answer, and then the user stops talking. You need to listen to his story. You need to, because from the story, you're going to identify the pain points that you are going to build your solution upon. And I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, I think you did, Sharif. And there's the follow-on question is, for example, how do we do interviews or focus groups remotely to test a product? I can probably answer that. Just because of the COVID world we live in, things have changed. But it has also enabled new way of doing things. Having a focus group remotely, not physically in a place, may have pluses and minuses. So, for example, it just gives you a wider reach because now you can do a lot more sessions with a click of a mouse. So people can join from all over the world and test a product. But having them in person also gives you that interaction and the observation of how they're feeling or doing something. You can see frustration in people's eyes and how they use their hands, for example. So there's a challenge. Now, we like to do both. We like to do a mixture of both. As much as you can, you want to have some human interaction, depending on your product, depending on your idea, because I don't know what you're thinking about, but you probably want to have some people picked, selected at random or based on a pattern and bring them into a room. Now, if you haven't done focus groups, you probably need somebody who knows the techniques of that focus groups, right? Because it does have a specialized way of doing it. And for example, when we do focus groups, as much as we can, we don't like to have the product designers in the room because they start to become defensive. A user becomes frustrated about a feature and starts to question that, or start to give feedback of why it's not working well, and a product designer in the room will begin to defend the logic, and it doesn't become a very good focus group. So there's some techniques that you can either again partner with us on, or have maybe sometimes specialized companies. But again, you're a startup, you don't want to pay big money for this kind of work. But there's some balance to do with focus groups, and again, this is what we're here for with the lab of KAUST. So doing it remotely is also an option, but you just have to be a little bit more careful about what you want to present remotely, because if you take a physical product and say, what do you guys think? Well, they can't touch it, right? So that's not a good way to do a remote focus group. But if it's a website or an application or a piece of software, and you want them to do some kind of a scenario, then that's probably more suitable for a remote session. There's also one more question here is, what is the best idea to generate customer pain before having a product? I don't know if you mean by generate, do you mean generate customer pain or assess customer pain? I'm guessing you're trying to assess customer pain before having a product. Let me take a shot at that, but Sharif can also jump in on this one. Customer pain, I mean, I think what you're trying to say is, where's the opportunity? How do I find an opportunity? And this is kind of a skill that comes from listening. Either it's something you're part of already and you feel the pain yourself, and you can almost immediately say there's an opportunity here, or by listening to people that you work with, socialize with, and you're realizing that there's something again that is not working really well. And maybe it's a process, maybe it's a technology, maybe it's the way things are. So the best advice I have is, and it's a challenge for us as humans, right? Is to put yourself in the shoes of others. Sometimes our own arrogance, our own egos, come in the way. The best thing as an entrepreneur is to become this empathetic person, right? If you put yourself in other people's shoes and think about and really, really transform yourself to be them, which is challenging, and think about how they go about and how they feel, and remove your own ego, your own bias, your own intellect out of it, right? And try your best to do that. Now, it's hard. Humans, not everybody can do this very well. Most people have a bias. And again, it doesn't mean that you all have to do it. If you just have one person in your team that has that skill, build on it. Let them be the person's shoes. They will kind of transform their brain and their mindset to act like this other people do, and go through the journey and say, Okay, they see it from a different viewpoint. Children is an interesting, and this is actually physical.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating world. You're all adults, at least I think. And the way you see things from your physical height is different than how kids see it from a physical height. So if you want to think of kids for a second, drop down to your knees or even go on your stomach and look at the physical world around you, and you'll see how their eyes might perceive things different than you are. So we take it for granted. We put things in place that are, touched by adults and they're in our own height. And it's not, right? It's not the world we live in. I can tell you how many times my wife argues with me. She's next door. I hope she doesn't hear that. About I'm 6'1", right? So I'm a little bit taller, right? And I put things physically at an eye level that suits me. And she's more like 5'6", I think, or 5'5", right? And she comes in and she gets annoyed at me because I'm putting things as human, everybody can see it. And the truth is not, right? So I put things on high shelves. I hang photos or pictures or frames a little bit higher than usual. And that's very annoying because she sees it from her world. It's like, that's not how I see things, right? So there's this constant, physical debate about how you put yourself in a customer's shoes. And again, I encourage you to think about that physically, logically, emotionally, mindset, and socially, right? Your social status makes a difference. How would people think about it that are different social status, right? So there's a very strong entrepreneurial spirit that comes from that. Sharif, anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, he's covered everything. Specifically, the important thing is that the best solution is to put yourself in the user shoes, and then comes the techniques, like the interview part or the research part. This is a technique on how to get the pain point, but the main thing is to put yourself in the user's shoes. Yeah.
And I think Malik here elaborated about how to generate customer pain. He's asking, how do I get feedback? Okay, so getting feedback is a separate thing. Getting feedback happens by running these experiments. So when you put a product out, or a feature, or a solution, or a tool, or again, it depends on what you're doing, a software piece. How to get feedback is you wanna give people a chance to interact with it, and again, you want to have a person, a group, or people that are working with you that say, okay, give us the feedback by constantly interacting with us, right? So this could happen in many ways. If it's a piece of software, you put a feedback button that allows people to give you quick feedback over a piece of software. Click here for feedback, and they give you that. There are other ways to do it by putting things in locations where the journey, or these touch points, we call them, where a user or a customer is going through, and again, give them a simple way to digitally, electronically give you feedback. I mean, one of them is, you've seen the smiley faces in airports. They're not necessarily the best, but they give you some indication. The challenge is, if you ask for too much feedback, people don't give it. If you ask for a smiley face, it's too abstracted, and it doesn't give you insight. So there are many ways to do it. There are companies that are actually doing this for a living, and they quantify feedback mechanism through multiple means, some surveys, some touch points at locations, and they give you this, metrics that come along. Again, it could be complicated, but you don't want to do this complicated work in your early stage. But the simple way to do it is get people in a room, get them to try something out, and get that feedback on the spot, document it, write it. Don't have your passionate designers, product owners, because they will start to become defensive. Right? So you want to neutralize that discussion as much as you can. Avoid having those passionate product people in the room, because they'll start to say, no, you don't get it. It's so obvious. You click here and you do this and it works. You want to have people that actually simply say, okay, interesting observation. Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, wow, okay, great. Write it down, right? That's important. Having designers in a room, they will start to really almost insult your users. So you don't want to have that.